The moon of Vera hung in silence, a gray husk caught between the jaws of war. Its surface was cracked and scarred, littered with the bones of old battles and the rusted skeletons of war machines left to rot. Most had fled when the Kithri Empire swept through the sector, burning human colonies to ash and rewriting star charts with their blood-red banners. But not everyone left. Lila stayed. She lived in the ruins of Outpost 7, a crumbling watchtower built into the side of a dead volcano. The structure leaned slightly like it was tired of standing. Inside, the air was cool and dry, scented with ozone and old metal. Lila moved through the rooms with quiet steps, her boots soft against the worn floor. She wore a patched flight suit, faded gray with dark streaks from engine grease and dried mud. Her dark hair was tied back, loose strands catching the dim light from the ceiling panels that still flickered on and off. In the corner of the common room, curled beside a humming battery array, lay Ember. The dragon was small, not much bigger than a wolf, but her presence filled the space. Her scales were not smooth like glass, but rough like old stone, shifting from deep violet to silver depending on the light. One wing was scarred, the membrane torn and mended with thin wire and synthetic thread. Her eyes, when open, glowed faintly gold like embers in a dying fire. Lila knelt beside her and ran a hand down the ridge of her spine. Ember exhaled slowly, a soft puff of warm air that carried the faint scent of burnt sugar. Still sleeping, Ember murmured in her mind voice, a whisper that only Lila could hear. Not sleeping. Lila said quietly, just resting your eyes? Ember cracked one open. You worry too much. Lila smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She had reason to worry. The Kithari had not come to Vera in force yet, but their scouts had been spotted on the far ridge 2 nights ago. Drones, sleek and silent, had skimmed the canyon floor before vanishing into the storm clouds that never seemed to leave. Lila had watched them from the tower's highest window. Her breath held, her fingers tight around the grip of her pulse rifle. They had not seen her, or if they had not cared. Humans were considered harmless now, broken, extinct in all but a few stubborn whispers. The great human armada had fallen decades ago in the Battle of Centauri Ring. Their worlds burned, their fleets shattered, their colonies abandoned or enslaved. What was left of humanity was scattered, hiding in the dark corners of space, forgotten by time and history. But Lila remembered. She remembered the songs her mother used to sing, the way stars used to blink like secrets in the night sky, the hum of a working engine, the feel of grass under bare feet, real grass, not the synthetic kind grown in hydrodomes. She remembered the day the Kithari ships appeared over her homeworld, silent and vast, blotting out the sun. She remembered running, always running. Now she was done running. Outside, the wind picked up, howling through the broken windows of the outpost. Dust swirled in the air, fine as ash. Lila stood and walked to the comm station, an old human-made console with cracked screens and frayed wires. She tapped a few keys and the static hissed to life. She listened. Nothing but silence. Then faintly, a burst of Kithari chatter. Her fingers stilled. They were close. She turned off the comms and moved to the armory. The room was small, lined with shelves holding weapons, tools, and spare parts. Most were scavenged or repaired. Nothing new, nothing fancy, just enough to survive. She slung the pulse rifle over her shoulder, checked the charge on her sidearm, and slipped 3 spare power cells into her belt pouch. Then she went to the locker in the back and pulled out a folded piece of cloth. It was a flag, old worn but still red, white, and blue. She tucked it into her inner pocket next to her heart. Ember padded in behind her, limping slightly on her injured leg. You're going out there. I have to, Lila said. They think this place is empty. Let's remind them it's not. Ember tilted her head. They will not expect a human, especially not one with a dragon. That's the point. Lila climbed the metal stairs to the roof, Ember following close behind. The wind bit at her face as she stepped into the open. Vera's sky was a dull orange during the day, streaked with clouds of sulfur and dust. In the distance, the silhouette of the Kithari scout ship crouched on the ridge like a predator waiting to pounce. They had landed at dawn. 5 soldiers, armored in sleek black carapace, their helmets shaped like insect heads with glowing red lenses. They moved with mechanical precision, scanning the ruins with handheld sensors. Lila watched them through her scope, her breath slow and steady. They were arrogant, careless. They laughed as they kicked over debris, mocking the human structures. One of them held up a broken toy, a small plastic bird. and tossed it into the wind, cackling as it spun away. Lila's jaw tightened, but she did not fire. Not yet. Instead, she turned and signaled Ember. The dragon blinked, then crept to the edge of the roof. With a soft grunt, she spread her wings just enough and leapt into the air. She did not fly high. She skimmed the ground, silent as smoke, vanishing into the maze of broken buildings below. Lila watched her go, then slipped down the maintenance ladder on the far side of the tower. She moved like a shadow, boots barely making a sound on the cracked stone. She knew every path, every gap, every hiding spot in the ruins. She had walked them for months, mapping them in her mind like constellations. By the time she reached the old mess hall, its roof collapsed. Its walls half gone, the Kithari were already inside, poking through the rubble with their rifles. "Nothing here," one growled in their guttural tongue. "Just junk. Humans were always weak. Maybe they ran," another said, "or died like rats." Lila crouched behind a fallen beam, her rifle steady. She could take them. All 5 if she wanted, but that wasn't the plan. Killing them wouldn't teach them anything. Fear would. And humans were very good at fear. A low rumble came from the hallway to her left. Ember emerged, eyes bright, smoke curling from her nostrils. Lila gave a slight nod. Ember opened her mouth and let out a sound that was not a roar but a hum. Deep, resonant, vibrating through the stone floor. The Kithari froze. "What was that?" one whispered. Then the lights in the mess hall flickered, not the natural light from outside, but the emergency bulb still wired into the ceiling. They blinked once, twice, then glowed red. The Kithari spun around, weapons raised. "Trap," their leader hissed, but there was no one there. Then a voice came over the old intercom system, crackling, distorted but unmistakably human. "You should not have come here," the Kithari shouted, firing blindly at the walls. Sparks flew. Dust rained from the ceiling. But the voice came again, now from a different speaker. "Humans are gone," one Kithari spat. "This is a recording." "Is it?" the voice replied. Ember darted forward, silent and fast. She slammed into the back of one soldier, knocking him to the ground. Before he could scream, Lila was there, pressing the muzzle of her rifle to his helmet. "Drop your weapon," she said in Kithari, her voice calm. The others turned, stunned. They had not expected a live human, least of all a woman standing alone with a dragon at her side. "You are alone," their leader sneered. "One human against 4 warriors. You are already dead," Lila smiled faintly. "You really should have done your homework." She tapped her comm, and the ground beneath them groaned. A hidden charge, planted weeks ago, detonated under the floor. Not enough to kill, but enough to disorient. The blast threw the Kithari off their feet. Smoke filled the room. Alarms wailed. When it cleared, Lila and Ember were gone. Only one thing remained, pinned to the wall with a knife, a human dog tag, engraved with a name and the words, "Never underestimate us." Back at the tower, Lila watched from the roof as the Kithari scrambled to their ship, shouting into their comms. They launched within minutes, their engines screaming as they tore through the clouds. Ember settled beside her, panting lightly. "They will come back," the dragon thought. "I know," Lila said, "but next time they'll bring more, and they'll be afraid." She looked up at the sky where stars were beginning to peek through the haze. "And that's when we show them what humans really do best. Not run, not hide, remember. Adapt, survive, and win." Days passed on Vera like slow breaths, long, quiet, and heavy with dust. The Kithari scout ship had fled, but Lila knew they would not stay gone. Fear was a seed, and she had planted it deep. Now she waited for it to grow. In the meantime, she worked. She checked traps, recalibrated sensors, and rewired dead comms lines into new paths. Ember helped where she could, her sharp mind reading old energy signatures and sniffing out hidden Kithari markers left behind during their retreat. The dragon's injured wings still slowed her flight, but on the ground she moved like liquid shadow, silent and sure. Lila had turned the ruins into a maze of tricks. Motion sensors triggered false heat blooms in empty rooms. Speakers hidden in the walls whispered Kithari phrases in broken dialects, just enough to sound like ghosts. Old drone shells, stripped of weapons but fitted with mirrors and projectors, cast flickering illusions of human soldiers patrolling corridors that led nowhere. It was not war. It was theater, and Lila was the director. Then, on the 5th night, the sky rumbled, not with storm clouds but with engines. 3 Cathari gunships descended, black and angular, their hulls bristling with cannons. They landed in a triangle formation beyond the ridge, far enough to avoid old minefields but close enough to surround the outpost. This time they were not scouting. They were hunting. From her perch in the tower, Lila watched through binoculars. At least 30 soldiers, armored, armed, and led by someone new, a tall figure in polished command armor, crimson stripes down the arms, a crest of twisted metal on the helmet. Varek, she guessed. She had heard his name in intercepted comms. Ruthless, brilliant, and convinced humans were nothing more than pests to be exterminated. He thinks we're hiding, Lila murmured. Ember lay beside her, eyes narrowed. He thinks you are afraid. Let him. That night, Lila made her move. She slipped out through the maintenance tunnels, old service routes built for repair bots during the outpost's prime. They wound beneath the surface, damp and narrow, lit only by the soft glow of her wrist lamp. Ember followed, her claws clicking softly on the metal floor. Their first target was the eastern gunship. Lila moved like water through the dark. She avoided the patrols with ease, using old drainage pipes and collapsed walls as cover. When she reached the ship's perimeter, she placed a small device near the fuel intake, a modified signal jammer wrapped in thermal paste. It would not explode, but it would make the ship think its own engines were overheating. Minutes later, alarms blared from the gunship. Cathari soldiers rushed to inspect, shouting orders. While they were distracted, Ember darted to the western edge of camp and triggered a buried sonic emitter. The pulse was low frequency, harmless to humans but painful to Cathari hearing. Soldiers clutched their helmets, disoriented. Lila watched from a ridge, smiling faintly. Then she vanished again. By dawn, the Cathari camp was in chaos. One soldier swore he saw a human woman standing in the ruins, watching them, then blinked and she was gone. Another claimed their comms had played a child's lullaby in perfect Cathari. A third reported finding fresh footprints leading into a sealed bunker that had no exit. Varek was furious. "There is no one here," he snarled, kicking over a supply crate. "This is ghost talk, tricks for cowards," but doubt had taken root. His soldiers moved slower now, eyes darting at every shadow. They no longer laughed. They whispered. Lila did not stop. On the second night, she sabotaged their water recycler, turned their lights off in sequence one by one until only emergency reds remained. She hacked into a spare Cathari drone and sent it flying in circles above their command tent, broadcasting static and a single repeating phrase in human English. "We remember." Varek finally lost control. "Find her," he roared. "Burn every building. Dig under every stone. I want her head on a spike." His troops obeyed, setting fire to the outer ruins, blasting holes in walls with plasma cutters. But the more they destroyed, the less they found, and the more they felt watched. Lila and Ember were never where they looked. Instead, they were always one step ahead, listening, learning, adapting. Back at the tower, during a rare quiet moment, Lila sat at the old comms console. She had been digging through encrypted files in the outpost's archives, searching for anything useful. Most data was corrupted. But one file kept reappearing, a beacon signal buried deep in the core system. It was faint, almost dead, but still pulsing. She traced its origin, a hidden chamber beneath the outpost. Level 0. Marked Black Project Echo. Ember tilted her head. "That place is shielded. I cannot sense what is inside." "Neither can they," Lila said. That night, while the Cathari tore apart the northern ruins, Lila descended into the depths of the outpost. The elevator was long dead, so she climbed down a service ladder hand over hand into the cold dark below. Ember followed, her scales brushing the narrow walls. At the bottom, a steel door stood sealed shut. It bore the old Human Earth Alliance insignia, a circle with stars and an eagle. Lila ran her hand over it, then found the manual override. With a groan of rusted metal, the door slid open. Inside, the air was dry and sterile. The lights flickered on automatically, revealing a small control room frozen in time. Consoles lined the walls, screens dark but intact. In the center stood a cylindrical pod, glassy and smooth, pulsing with a soft blue light. Lila approached slowly. The pod opened with a hiss. Inside was not a person, not a weapon, but a data core, shaped like a human heart, glowing faintly. As she reached for it, the console behind her lit up. A voice played, calm, female, and human. If you are hearing this, the Cathari have returned. Or something worse has come. This beacon is not a call for help. It is a key. It unlocks the Ghost Fleet. Coordinates are embedded. But be warned, activated only when all else fails. The fleet was never meant to kill. It was meant to protect what we could not. Lila stared at the core in her hands. It hummed warmly like it recognized her. Ember touched her mind gently. This changes everything. It does, Lila whispered. Above them, the ground shook. Another explosion. The Cathari were getting closer. But Lila no longer feared them. She had something they did not understand, something they could not see, something they would never expect. As she climbed back to the surface, Core tucked safely in her pack, Ember beside her, she knew the game had shifted. No more whispers. No more shadows. Soon the silence would break and the stars would remember humanity. The Cathari tightened their grip on Vera like a fist closing around a stone. Patrols doubled. Drones swept the ruins in tight grids. Farek had set up a command post in the old landing field. Surrounded by turrets and shield emitters, he was done with ghosts. Now he wanted blood. But Lila was already gone. She had taken the data core from level 0 and vanished into the canyon network east of the outpost. Ember carried her on her back, wings straining against the wind but steady. They flew low, hugging the rock walls, avoiding sensors and patrols. Lila clutched the core against her chest. It pulsed faintly, as if breathing. By midday, they reached the edge of the Dead Sea, a vast basin of cracked salt flats where nothing grew and no ship ever landed. Here, half buried in the salt and sand, lay the entrance to Hangar 9. It had been sealed for decades, its blast doors fused shut by time and neglect. But the core reacted as they approached. A low tone hummed through the ground. The doors groaned, then split open with a hiss of stale air. Inside, darkness yawned. Lila stepped forward, Ember close behind. The hangar was massive, cathedral-like, lined with dormant service arms and empty fuel lines, and in the center, resting on silent rails, sat a ship. It was long and lean, blackened by time, but still proud. Its hull bore scars from forgotten battles, but its lines were sharp, purposeful. Along the side, in faded white paint, read 2 words, Iron Grace. Lila exhaled. She had heard stories of the Ghost-class vessels, human stealth ships designed not for war, but for rescue, recovery, and last-chance evacuations. They were fast, quiet, and nearly invisible to sensors. Most were lost in the fall of the Alliance. None were supposed to still fly, but the Iron Grace was waiting. She climbed the boarding ramp, boots echoing in the hollow silence. The interior was clean, preserved by vacuum seals and automated maintenance bots that still whirred softly in the walls. The cockpit glowed with standby lights, green and calm. Lila slid into the pilot's chair. It molded around her like it remembered her shape. Ember curled in the co-pilot's seat, wings folded tight. Lila inserted the data core into the central console. The ship woke. Lights flared, systems hummed to life. And from the overhead speaker, a voice spoke, smooth, calm, and achingly human. Welcome back, Pilot Lila Cross. Authorization confirmed. Ghost protocol initiated. Lila froze. You know my name. You are the last registered neural match for Iron Grace, the AI replied. Your biometrics were logged during cadet training, Sol year 2341. You never completed your final flight exam. A faint smile touched Lila's lips. I had other plans, the AI did not respond. Instead, it displayed a star map on the main screen. Dozens of red dots blinked into view, scattered across the sector, hidden in asteroid belts, dark craters, and dead orbits. The Ghost Fleet. These ships were not weapons, the AI said. They were Orcs. Each carries a fragment of human memory, culture, science, art, language. When the Alliance fell, they went dark to preserve what remained. They await your command. Lila stared at the map. This was bigger than Vera. Bigger than the Cathari. The fleet was a time capsule, a final hope. Then alarms blared. Incoming signal, the AI said. Cathari warcruiser Shadow Maw entering orbit. Deploying sensors. They have detected hangar activity. Lila's hands flew over the controls. Can we launch engines or cold? 30 seconds to warm up. Shields offline. Stealth mode available but limited. Do it. The Iron Grace lifted silently from its cradle, hovering just above the salt flats. Ember tensed, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if she could see through the metal. Outside, the sky darkened, not from clouds but from something descending. A Kithari cruiser, vast and jagged, eclipsed the sun. Its underbelly opened, releasing drop pods that streaked toward the surface like falling teeth. Varek had come in force. Lila engaged stealth mode. The ship's hull absorbed light, turning nearly invisible. She flew low, weaving through canyons, heading back toward the outpost, but not to hide. To fight, she said. Broadcast the ghost signal. Wake the fleet. Warning, the AI replied. Activation will reveal all ghost-class locations. If enemy forces intercept the signal, they may target the Orcs. They'll have to go through me first. She pressed the command. A pulse rippled through subspace. Silent, invisible, but felt by every ghost ship within 1,000. Light years, one by one, they answered. Above Vera, space shimmered. First one hull appeared, a sleek cutter emerging from behind a moon. Then another, peeling out of an asteroid field. Then 10 more. 20. 50. The ghost fleet materialized like stars waking from sleep. Engines cold but weapons hot. The Kithari cruiser hesitated. Varek's voice crackled over open comms. Stunned. Impossible. The humans are extinct. From the Iron Grace, Lila opened a channel. Her voice was calm, clear, and carried across every frequency. You were told not to underestimate us. Before Varek could respond, the sky tore open again. But this time, not with ships, with something worse. A black wave rolled through the void, swallowing light. It was not a fleet, not an army. It was a storm of living ships, jagged, organic, pulsing with red veins. The Male, the Devourers. They had followed the ghost signal. Even the Kithari recoiled. Their cruiser spun, engines flaring as it tried to flee. But the Male moved faster. They latched onto the hull, melting metal with acidic tendrils, flooding the decks with hive mind spores. Lila's blood ran cold. What are the Male? A post-singularity swarm, the AI replied. They consume civilizations, absorb their knowledge, then erase all traces. They have devoured 17 species. Humanity was their next target until we vanished. Ember growled low in her throat. They are coming here. Lila looked at the screen. The Mael were turning toward Vera. Toward her, the Kithari were already breaking apart. Drop pods abandoned mid-descent. Varek's command ship limped away, half its hull gone. In minutes, the battlefield was empty, except for the Iron Grace, the Ghost Fleet, and the oncoming storm. AI, Lila said. Can the fleet fight them? Not as weapons. But as keys, yes. What does that mean? The ghost ships do not destroy. They preserve. And the Male cannot consume what they do not understand. Lila glanced at Ember. The dragon's eyes glowed brighter than ever, her scales shimmering with strange energy. She looked at the core still pulsing in the console. Ember, Lila said slowly, you're not just a dragon, are you? Ember's voice came not in words but in feeling, a wave of memory, purpose, and ancient design. I am a bridge. The AI confirmed it. Biosig matches Project Emberwing. A neural interface created to link human empathy with machine memory. The Male think in logic, in hunger. They have never encountered compassion as a weapon. Lila understood. The Ghost Fleet wasn't here to shoot. It was here to show, to teach, to change. She steered the Iron Grace upward, toward the storm. Then let's remind them what it means to be human. Ember spread her wings inside the cabin, light pouring from her body. The core flared, and across the fleet every ship aligned, not for battle but for broadcast. They would not fire. They would sing. And the song would be hope. The Male came like a tide of teeth and shadow, swallowing light and silence in equal measure. Their ships were not built. They grew, twisting metal and flesh into jagged, pulsing forms that screamed without sound. They did not speak. They consumed. And once they consumed, nothing remained, not even memory. But Lila did not run. She guided the Iron Grace upward, straight into the storm. Behind her, the Ghost Fleet followed, not in attack formation, but in a wide, slow ring like dancers circling a fire. Their engines glowed soft blue, not red. Their weapons stayed cold. Ember sat beside her, eyes closed, body humming. The dragon was changing. Her scales shimmered with veins of silver light, and her breath came in slow, rhythmic pulses. She was no longer just a companion. She was a conduit. Prepare neural link, the AI said. Lila nodded. She placed her hands on the console. A thin filament extended from the core, connecting to a port on her temple. It did not hurt. It felt like remembering. Images flooded her mind, not of war, but of life. A child laughing in a garden. An old man playing piano under starlight. A fleet engineer humming while fixing an engine. A mother whispering a lullaby. Moments of kindness, courage, and quiet joy. The true heart of humanity. The male had never seen this. They had scoured worlds, absorbed data, dissected civilizations, but they had only seen fear, survival, and domination. They did not know what to do with love. As the iron grace reached the edge of the swarm, Ember opened her eyes. Now, she said in Lila's mind. Lila activated the broadcast. Every ghost ship released not a weapon but a signal, a wave of human memory, encoded in light and sound shaped by Ember's biofield. It was not a virus. It was a story, and the male, for the first time, were forced to listen. The effect was immediate. The front line of male ships faltered. Their movements grew erratic. Their red veins flickered, confused. They tried to reject the signal, to burn it away, but it was not data to be deleted. It was feeling to be felt. One ship slowed. Its surface rippled, then softened. The jagged edges smoothed. The red glow dimmed to blue. Another shuddered, then split open, not in destruction, but in bloom. From its core, a cluster of crystalline petals unfolded, catching the starlight. The hive mind recoiled. Deep in the swarm, the central consciousness, vast and ancient, screamed in silent panic. It had no defense against empathy. It could not compute sacrifice. It did not understand why a species would build ships not to kill but to save. Lila watched as the male began to fracture. Some ships turned on each other, torn between hunger and something new. Curiosity. Others drifted away, lost in the echo of human songs. A few even aligned with the ghost fleet, their forms reshaping into smoother, gentler shapes. Varek, watching from the crippled remains of his command ship, could not believe his eyes. "They are changing them," he whispered. His second-in-command stared at the view screen. "What kind of weapon is this?" "Not a weapon," Varek said. "Something worse." On the iron grace, Lila's hands trembled. The neural link was draining her. Memories were not free to give. Every moment of joy she shared cost her a piece of her own. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she did not stop. Ember leaned against her, sharing strength. "You are not alone." The AI monitored the signal. A hive integrity at 40%. Empathy resonance increasing. "They are learning." "Keep going," Lila said through gritted teeth. Below on Vera, the last Cathari soldiers emerged from hiding. They looked up at the sky, not in fear but in awe. The storm of death was turning into a sky of light. One young Cathari private dropped his rifle. "What are they doing?" His sergeant stared, voice quiet. "They are showing us what we forgot." Above, the central mile core pulsed once, then shattered, not in explosion but in release. A wave of calm spread through the swarm. The red faded. The hunger ceased. The ships drifted, no longer devourers, but something new, something searching. The ghost fleet slowed their broadcast. The last echoes of human memory faded into the void. Silence returned. But it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence after a storm has passed, the kind that carries peace. Lila slumped in her seat, exhausted. Ember nuzzled her gently, purring like an old engine. The AI spoke softly. "Mission complete. The male are no longer a threat. They have been rewritten." Lila looked at the view screen. The transformed male ships were grouping together, forming a new pattern, a spiral like a galaxy. Then as one, they turned and flew into deep space, not to consume but to understand. Barek's ship powered down its weapons. He opened a channel, not to attack, but to speak. "Human," he said, voice rough but clear. "What you did, it was not war." "No," Lila replied. "It was something better." She cut the channel and leaned back. The iron grace floated in the calm dark, surrounded by the ghost fleet. The battle was over. Not with fire, but with feeling. Ember rested her head on Lila's lap. "You showed them the heart of your kind." "I hope it was enough," Lila said. The AI displayed a new message on the console. A signal, faint but clear, coming from deep in the outer rim. Another beacon. Another outpost. Another chance. Lila smiled faintly. "Then we keep going." She powered up the engines. The ghost fleet fell into formation behind her. The war was not over, but for the first time in decades, humanity had not just survived. They had reminded the universe why they mattered. And dragons, it turned out, did not roar. They rewrote the stars. Vera was quiet now. The dust still swirled in the canyons. The wind still howled through broken towers, but the fear was gone. In its place hung something softer, something like respect. The Cathari had left, not in defeat, but in silence. They took their dead, buried their machines, and vanished into the void without a word. What they carried back to their empire was not a report of battle, but a story, and stories once told cannot be unspoken. Lila did not stay to watch them go. She and Ember lifted off in the Iron Grace the morning after the mail departed. The Ghost Fleet followed, not as an army but as a quiet procession, sailing through the dark like guardians of a forgotten promise. The ship's engines hummed with calm certainty, no longer running, no longer hiding, just moving forward. From orbit, Vera looked small, gray, tired. But Lila knew better. Beneath its scars were memories, courage, and the proof that even one human with one dragon and one old ship could change the tide of war. The AI had plotted a new course. The signal from the outer rim grew stronger each hour. It came from a dead zone, uncharted, unmapped, ignored by every major power. Exactly where a hidden human beacon would be. As the Iron Grace slipped past asteroid fields and silent moons, Lila sat in the cockpit with Ember curled at her feet. She ran her fingers over the worn armrests, thinking of all the hands that had touched these controls before her. Pilots who never came home. Engineers who kept the lights on until the end. Mothers who sang to their children as the world burned. She was not alone. She never had been. Ember lifted her head. You miss the ground. A little, Lila admitted. But the sky feels like home now. The dragon blinked slowly. Then this is where we belong. Days passed in the quiet rhythm of space travel. The Ghost Fleet stayed close, their hulls catching starlight like old armor polished by time. They did not speak unless needed. They did not fight unless asked. They simply were, reminders that humanity had not vanished. It had scattered. It had hidden, and now it was waking up. When they reached the source of the signal, they found not a planet but a derelict station, drifting in the shadow of a frozen gas giant. It was small, shaped like a teardrop, its hull pitted with micrometeor strikes. No lights, no movement, but the beacon pulsed from within, steady and clear. Lila guided the Iron Grace to dock. The airlock hissed open. Inside, the station was cold, dark, and empty, except for one room at the center. There, on a console covered in frost, a screen flickered to life as she approached. A face appeared. An old woman, eyes kind, hair silver, wearing a faded flight jacket. If you're seeing this, the woman said, voice crackling but warm. Then the echo worked. You found us. Lila stood still. Who are you? I was station keeper here. Last of the Orion relay. We thought we were the only ones left. But then we heard your broadcast, the one with the mail. We heard what you did. The woman smiled. You gave us hope again. Behind her, doors opened. People emerged, dozens of them. Men, women, children. All human. All alive. They had been hiding for years, surviving on recycled air and stubborn faith. They had heard the ghost signal. They had seen the mail change. And they knew someone out there still remembered what it meant to be human. One child stepped forward, holding a small toy dragon carved from wire and plastic. Is this yours? She asked, eyes wide. Lila knelt. Ember patted beside her and gently nuzzled the girl's hand. The child gasped, then laughed. In that moment, Lila understood. It was never about winning a war. It was about passing the light. She stayed at the station for 3 days. She shared supplies, stories, and coordinates. She left them with a transmitter linked to the Ghost Fleet, so they would never be alone again. And before she left, she etched a message into the station's main console, just like she had on Vera, why you should never underestimate humans. Then she and Ember returned to the Iron Grace. The Ghost Fleet waited. As they sailed away, Lila looked back one last time. The station's lights were brighter now. Windows glowed with warm yellow. Life returning. The AI spoke softly. New signal detected. Sector 7 echo. Weak but active. Set course, Lila said. She leaned back in her seat, Ember resting her head on her lap. The stars outside were countless, cold and beautiful. Somewhere out there, more beacons waited. More stories. More people who had not given up, and she would find them all. Not as a soldier. Not as a hero. Just as a human who refused to let the light go out. In the months that followed, whispers spread across the galaxy. Tales of a woman and her dragon, sailing with a fleet of ghosts, answering calls no one else could hear. The Cathari spoke of her in council chambers. The freed Mael drifted near human sectors, watching, learning. And on a dozen hidden worlds, children told stories of the Iron Grace, how it came when all hope was lost, and left behind a single message: why you should never underestimate humans. Lila never claimed to be special. She was just one person who chose to stand when others ran, who chose to remember when others forgot, who chose to believe that kindness could be stronger than fear. And in the end, that was enough. The stars kept turning, the dark kept waiting, but now, wherever humans were, they knew they were not alone. Because echoes never fade. They grow.